leading lady ingenue was at that time. So that was the message that
Most fans grew up believing Melissa Gilbert and Melissa Sue Anderson were just as close off-screen as Laura and Mary Ingalls were on Little House on the Prairie. But according to Gilbert, that picture-perfect sisterhood was mostly just what the cameras wanted you to see. Behind the scenes, things were far more complicated. After years of rumors, cast stories, and quiet tension bubbling under the surface, Gilbert is finally opening up about what really went down between the two Melissas. And once you hear it, the whole show starts to feel a lot different. Her early life's unsettling contradictions. Melissa Gilbert's early life unfolded more like a layered mystery than a straightforward childhood. Even she has said that her story felt split into different versions. The one her mother told, the one the public believed, the one she lived through, and the one she's still trying to make sense of. From the very beginning, her life was shaped by overlapping truths and unanswered questions. She was born in 1964 and placed for adoption almost immediately. Barbara Crane and Paul Gilbert welcomed her into their home, but they also kept certain parts of her origin story tucked away. For years, the careers of her birth parents were dressed up with polished, imaginary titles. Later on, Melissa discovered her birth mother had been a dancer, not the elegant prima ballerina she had always been told about. And her birth father? He wasn't the refined academic she grew up imagining, but a stock car racer living a far different life than the myth suggested. By the time Melissa was 8, her adoptive parents had separated. Her mother remarried, but that new family structure didn't bring her any closer to her stepfather. Melissa never sugarcoated it. She simply didn't connect with him, and when she looked back at why she had been adopted in the first place, she found even more confusion. Her parents had always said they struggled to have children, but reality didn't quite match the story. Paul had a daughter from a previous marriage, whom Melissa met once. Barbara became pregnant twice after adopting Melissa. One pregnancy ended in loss, and the other brought Melissa's sister, Sarah, into the family. In other words, both parents were fully capable of having children, which left a lingering sense that something unspoken sat at the center of her beginnings. Once again, her life opened with a question mark she didn't place there. At the same time, her childhood wasn't quiet or ordinary. Before she was even old enough to string full sentences together, her adoptive parents were taking her to commercial auditions. That early push into the entertainment world opened doors quickly. By 1972, she was already appearing on major television shows, including a role on the classic Western series Gunsmoke. Just a few years later, everything changed. Melissa landed the role that would define her childhood and introduce her to millions. Laura Ingalls on Little House on the Prairie. Long before it hit television screens, Little House on the Prairie lived as a treasured book series. Written by Laura Ingalls. Wilder between 1932 and 1943, the 9-book collection was inspired by her memories growing up across the American Midwest between 1870 and 1894. It was a time when settlers were still moving into huge stretches of land gained through the Louisiana Purchase, a time when much of the region was considered wild, unfamiliar territory. Families who moved out there were known as homesteaders. They packed everything into wagons and ventured into open land with nothing but grit, hope, and the determination to build a new life. These families had to rely entirely on themselves. They made their own clothes, grew their own food, built their own homes, and pushed through harsh seasons with no nearby stores, resources, or reliable medical care. Injuries, illness, and hunger were constant, unwelcome companions. Yet for many, the journey promised a fresh start. and the kind of adventure they wouldn't find anywhere else. Laura Ingalls Wilder captured those realities through a child's eyes, turning hardship, curiosity, and resilience into stories that resonated with readers of all ages. The series eventually drew the attention of producer Ed Friendly, who saw its potential on screen. He gathered a team to bring the Ingalls family to television, and together they created the show that would become a cultural fixture. Little House on the Prairie made its official debut on September 11, 1974, and with it, Melissa Gilbert stepped into a role that would shape her legacy for decades to come. The dark side of early stardom. Now, Melissa Gilbert may have risen to stardom quickly, but the spotlight came with a heavy price. Fame is hard enough for adults to navigate, but for a child, it can become overwhelming in ways most people never see. Hollywood is full of stories about young actors who grew up too fast, fell into destructive habits, and never fully recovered. As Melissa's career soared, she found herself slipping toward the same dangerous patterns, turning to alcohol and drugs as she tried to survive the pressures around her. But her struggles didn't start in adulthood. One of the most devastating moments of her early life happened when she was just 11 years old. Her adopted father took his own life, though she was told at the time that he had suffered a stroke. Only a few people knew the truth, and Melissa spent weeks unable to function, trying to process the loss without understanding what had really happened. She later learned that her father, a World War II veteran, had been living with unbearable, unmanaged pain that pushed him to a tragic decision. Without a father figure, Melissa naturally gravitated toward one when she joined the cast of Little House on the Prairie. She adored Michael Landon, who played her on-screen father, and their bond grew incredibly strong. He treated her with deep affection, and she saw him as the stabilizing presence she had been missing at home. Later, as an adult, she realized there were complicated layers to their relationship. She remembered how he kept vodka in his coffee mug on set, a detail she didn't understand until she grew older. She even believed that this early exposure influenced the type of men she was drawn to, men who carried the same familiar scent of alcohol. But the closeness between them eventually shattered. When Michael left his wife for a makeup artist on the show, it struck at an old wound for Melissa. Her own parents had split when she was 8, and watching another father figure break apart, his family felt like a betrayal she couldn't absorb. Hurt and angry, she cut off all contact with him. Her teenage years brought new chapters, beginning with a bright-eyed 18-year-old named Thomas Cruise, Mapother IV, years before he became the global superstar known as Tom Cruise. When he first arrived in Los Angeles, broke and determined, he crossed paths with 16-year-old Melissa, who was already a household name. They had a sweet, innocent romance. She later shared, with a smile, that they never moved past making out, though she remembered him as a great kisser. The memory came with a charming detail. She once bought him his very first set of dishes, a small gesture that hinted at just how early in his struggle he really was. Tom and Melissa eventually drifted apart, and both of their lives moved quickly in new directions. Melissa's next great love came when she was still a teenager, Rob Lowe. They first met when she was around 14 or 15, but they didn't start dating seriously until she turned 17. From that point forward, their romance became a tabloid fixture. Melissa fell deeply for him, swept up in a love that felt exciting, intense, and bigger than anything she had known. Despite the ups and downs, and despite infidelity on both sides, the relationship grew serious enough that they became engaged in 1986. Melissa was only 22 when she said yes, but everything unraveled soon after. When she found out she was pregnant, she shared the news with Hope. Rob, however, told her he wasn't ready to be a husband or a father. The engagement collapsed, their relationship ended, and not long after, Melissa suffered a miscarriage. The loss left her devastated. She later wrote about how painful it was to lose both the baby and the relationship at the same time, describing the emotional spiral that followed. It was a grief she tried to bury with alcohol, even though it only pulled her deeper into darkness. Years later, on a podcast conversation with Jenny Garth, Melissa looked back at that chapter of her life with a mix of clarity and vulnerability. She talked about how young she truly was during her relationship with Rob, only 17 when it began, 23 when it finally ended. She admitted she felt strangely experienced because she had been in the industry for so long, while Rob was just starting to explode into fame. She watched his star rise in real time, attending premieres and award shows at his side, trying to keep up with the chaos swirling around him. What she wasn't prepared for, though, was the wave of attention he received, especially from young women. Melissa remembered how girls would shove past her as if she weren't even there, slipping their phone numbers into Rob's pockets right in front of her. That experience, she said, was not just uncomfortable, it was deeply unsettling. It chipped away at her confidence, left her feeling invisible, and added another layer of emotional strain to an already volatile relationship. Looking back, she didn't sugarcoat it. Those years were complicated, painful, and overwhelming. They shaped her in ways she didn't fully understand until much later, revealing how fame, heartbreak, and unresolved grief had collided at the very center of her young life. Shocking secrets that shaped her life. After her turbulent breakup with Rob Lowe, Melissa Gilbert moved quickly into a new chapter of her life. In 1988, she married actor Bo Brinkman after knowing him for only 6 weeks. It was a whirlwind decision that led straight into a complicated marriage. The couple welcomed a son, Dakota, but behind the scenes, their relationship was already strained. Years later, in her memoir, Prairie, Melissa described how they attempted to repair things after a trial separation, even entering therapy to try and piece their marriage back together. That was when Brinkman confessed to a one-night stand with Shannon Doherty, an admission that sent shockwaves through Melissa's life. 10 years had passed since Melissa had worked with Shannon, but suddenly, the actress resurfaced at the center of Melissa's marriage problems. The tension built until the two crossed paths at the 1991 Emmys, where Melissa confronted her. The exchange left her stunned and unsettled, and she walked away convinced that some wounds cut too deep to ever fully close. Neither Doherty nor Brinkman ever publicly addressed the affair, but the anger didn't fade. Even years later, Melissa's sister, Sarah, admitted that if she ever ran into Doherty again, she wouldn't bother with words. She would simply hit her. That lingering bitterness showed just how deeply the situation had affected their family. Despite the chaos, Melissa eventually found joy again. She later married actor Timothy Busfield, who said he knew almost immediately that she was the one. But before that peace settled in, she had to survive more painful moments, some far more shocking than the affair. One night, when her son was still a newborn, Melissa went downstairs to get milk from the fridge. Instead of a quiet living room, she walked in on Brinkman with a sex worker on their couch. The betrayal left her reeling, but it also crystallized just how fractured the marriage had become. Still, Melissa later admitted she wouldn't change her past. As she put it, if she hadn't married Brinkman, she wouldn't have her son, and he was worth every hardship. The marriage officially ended in 1994. Yet even after the divorce papers were signed, the drama kept coming. While Melissa was vacationing in Austria, With actor Bruce Boxleitner, who would later become her second husband, she learned Brinkman had contacted Child Protective Services. He accused her nanny of abusing their child, an allegation that triggered an investigation. Thankfully, it was quickly dismissed. Melissa later called the entire situation baseless and cruel, especially because she was interviewed by CPS while still recovering from breast augmentation surgery. She joked darkly about trying to look like a perfectly composed mother, but instead feeling more like a disheveled actress who had just unwrapped a holiday cosmetic upgrade. But none of these difficult chapters slowed her drinking. Melissa turned more heavily to alcohol, sometimes finishing 2 bottles of wine a night, which strained her marriage to Boxleitner. Even after they divorced, the habit lingered, eating away at her stability. Her career hadn't vanished, but she was drifting into smaller television movies and quiet roles, gaining the unofficial title of the Queen of Made-for-TV Movies. She did have standout moments, including voice acting as Batgirl in Batman, the animated series, but the trajectory wasn't what she wanted. Deep down, she knew the drinking was holding her hostage. The wake-up call hit hard one evening when she passed out in her dog's bed during a dinner with a guest. It was her son's plea that finally pushed her to seek help. She attended her first Alcoholics Anonymous meeting and felt, for the first time in years, that she could rebuild herself. Through the support of others in the program, she slowly regained her sense of direction. Sobriety sharpened her focus. She realized she didn't want to coast in small TV projects anymore. She wanted her life and her work to mean something again. Fans often asked whether she'd ever return for a reboot of Little House on the Prairie, but Melissa consistently dismissed the idea. The original series stayed in constant syndication, and she felt its legacy was doing just fine without a revival. Still, she did return to the world of the Ingalls family in a different way. In 2008, she stepped onto the stage as Ma Ingalls in the musical adaptation of Little House on the Prairie. A full-circle moment that honored her past while letting her reinvent herself. But the role took a physical toll. During the show's run, she began experiencing intense back pain. At first, she brushed it off, hoping it would fade. Instead, the pain only grew worse. Eventually, she made a promise to herself. She would go to the hospital only when the pain became absolutely unbearable. And that moment was coming much sooner than she expected. You see, Melissa had been powering through intense back pain while performing in the Little House on the Prairie musical, brushing it off as just another ache that came with the job. But one day, the pain finally became too overwhelming, forcing her to head to the hospital. That's when everything shifted. Doctors told her something she never saw coming. She had been performing for months with a broken back. Not a strain, not a pulled muscle, a full-on fracture. At the time, she was in her 40s, carrying the iconic role of Ma Ingalls on stage, all while her body was literally broken. When her castmates found out, they were stunned. The dedication she had shown, night after night, show after show, earned her a wave of admiration from everyone around her. Once the musical wrapped its original run, she was finally able to get the surgery she desperately needed. But recovery brought its own kind of pain. In her memoir, Back to the Prairie, she revealed that her husband then, Bruce Boxleitner, wasn't exactly the nurturing type. She wrote that post-surgical care and compassion were not his specialty. That realization sparked something deeper, an emotional reckoning where she wondered why she believed she didn't deserve real care and support. Looking back even further, she had already been questioning the cracks in their relationship. In her earlier memoir, Prairie Tale, she admitted to having an emotional affair during the filming of Seduction in a Small Town. She never named the actor outright, but Dennis McNamara played her screen husband. Melissa said she often caught feelings for co-stars, but this time it hit differently. Fueled by alcohol and emotional loneliness, she found herself opening up to the wrong person because she was too afraid to be that vulnerable with her actual husband. She and Bruce tried to mend things through therapy, but the emotional distance was already too wide. By 2011, their marriage came to an end, and that breakup sent her spiraling. After the divorce, Melissa didn't just start over. She tore everything down and rebuilt herself from scratch. She changed her appearance, bought a sports car, and rushed into dating someone younger. Later, she admitted it felt like she had lost her mind, but her experience isn't uncommon. Neuropsychologist Dr. Sanam Hafiz explained that after a major breakup, people often feel unmoored, swinging between wanting to escape the pain and trying to reinvent themselves overnight. Still, Dr. Hafiz encourages a slower, steadier approach to healing. She warns against rushing into relationships, extreme makeovers, or big impulsive changes, because those decisions can cloud judgment during a vulnerable time. For Melissa, though, the deeper hurt came long before the divorce papers. She described a moment after her back surgery when she needed a ride home. She expected her husband to show up. Instead, he suggested she call a friend or hire a car. That moment sat with her, heavy, cold, unforgettable, throughout her long recovery, and made her confront truths she had spent years avoiding. So when the marriage finally ended, it made sense that she felt pulled toward a dramatic reset. She needed something, anything, that felt new. Even so, Dr. Hafiz says it's important not to judge the past with today's clarity. People make choices based on what they know in the moment, and growth comes from accepting that. In the end, Melissa doesn't regret the chaos that followed her divorce. She believes those tough years carved out the path that led her to who she is today. Physically, she did recover thanks to a plastic implant placed during surgery. But, she has said, the whole ordeal affected her height. And unfortunately, it wasn't the last major health struggle she would face. You see, after recovering from a serious broken back, Melissa Gilbert set her sights on something bold, competing on Dancing with the Stars. In 2012, she returned to the spotlight, paired with a skilled Ukrainian-American dance pro, and ready to prove she was stronger than ever. But that season brought another frightening moment. During one of her performances, Melissa suffered a sudden, mysterious injury right there on the ballroom floor. Viewers watching live couldn't quite tell what had happened, and confusion spread almost instantly. She didn't leave her supporters in the dark. She went straight to Twitter, explaining that she had suffered both a concussion and whiplash during the routine. Naturally, fans wanted answers, and everyone started replaying the performance, trying to pinpoint the exact moment the injury occurred. Her team soon brought clarity. Her representative told Access Hollywood that Melissa had actually hit her head on the ballroom floor, a detail that several of her fellow cast members confirmed. Actress and comedian Sherry Shepherd told Us Weekly that Melissa had hit her head mid-dance and began feeling dizzy afterward, prompting the medical team to rush her to the hospital. Singer Gavin DeGraw added that he noticed she struck the back of her head at some point during the routine. Even so, the debate didn't die down. Some viewers claimed they never saw an actual head-to-floor impact on the broadcast. Maxim Chmerkovsky, her partner, and an accomplished Latin ballroom dance champion had taken a hard fall during their Paso Doble. But sharp-eyed fans insisted no clear footage showed Melissa making contact with the floor. To settle the confusion, Linda Carroll, a Today.com contributor and co-author of The Concussion Crisis, explained that a concussion doesn't always require a direct blow to the head. She used a simple comparison. The brain can be like a passenger in a car without a seatbelt. When the car stops suddenly, the body stops, but the brain keeps moving, colliding with the inside of the skull. Football tackles, quick whiplash movements, or sudden stops can cause the same effect. Carol reviewed Melissa's performance and said it wasn't hard to imagine how an injury could happen during such a powerful, high-energy routine, especially given Melissa's history of spinal issues and the sharp, explosive motions built into the choreography. Those head and neck injuries from 2012 led to an even bigger problem: 2 herniated discs. That meant yet another surgery, her third. Unfortunately, the fusion didn't take. When a spinal fusion fails, the pain can be agonizing. Melissa later revealed that the hardware placed in her spine had begun boring holes into the vertebrae above and below the surgical site. And the hits still didn't stop. Just months after that ordeal, she was renting a home when the balcony suddenly collapsed on her. One jaw-dropping event after another, leaving her with ongoing spinal issues that she has carried with her ever since. Melissa Gilbert finally exposes the truth about Melissa, Sue Anderson. The story of Melissa Sue Anderson and Melissa Gilbert begins the way most people remember it. 2 bright young actresses stepping into the roles of the beloved Ingalls sisters on Little House on the Prairie. On screen, they looked inseparable, radiating that warm, sisterly bond fans adored. But behind the scenes, things played out very differently. Their real relationship wasn't filled with fights or explosions. It was distant, cool, and often complicated. As the show gained popularity, people naturally started wondering about the dynamic between the 2 Melissas. And when Anderson eventually left the series, the rumor mill kicked into overdrive, insisting the split must have been caused by tension with Gilbert. But the truth is far more layered, shaped by childhood insecurities, 2 very different personalities, and the pressures of growing up on one of the biggest shows on television. The earliest traces of a split between them showed up when Gilbert started landing major acting roles outside of the series. Things like The Miracle Worker and The Diary of Anne Frank. Meanwhile, Anderson was becoming frustrated with her own characters' storylines. Mary Ingalls was often written as the emotional punching bag of the show, surviving one tragedy after another. She told People magazine that she felt like the writers leaned on Mary's hardships whenever they ran out of ideas. Both actresses were ambitious. Both were hungry to grow, and that drive sometimes set them on separate paths. Gilbert later wrote about this distance in her memoir, Prairie, describing how their personalities never quite clicked. She remembered their very first meeting during a screen test. Even then, at just 10 years old, she sensed a wall between them. Anderson, who was 12 at the time, carried herself with a seriousness that felt far beyond her age. Gilbert, by contrast, was an open book, emotional, expressive, and eager to connect. She also felt outmatched in ways she couldn't ignore. She remembered Anderson as exceptionally pretty and poised, while she described herself as more plain and awkward. As the girls got older, those differences expanded. Anderson started wearing makeup, growing her nails, smoking, and dating well-known young actors. Gilbert joked that while Anderson was the girl boys wanted to marry, she was the one they wanted to take fishing. Even their mothers added fuel to the distance. Gilbert envied the tight, quiet bond Anderson shared with her mom. It felt calm and private, nothing like the emotional roller coaster she experienced with her own mother, especially when their arguments spilled out onto the set. It was another area where the 2 young actresses lived in different worlds. Michael Landon even tried to manage some of the confusion early on. With 2 Melissas running around the set, he decided Anderson would go by Missy, while Gilbert kept her character nickname Half Pint. As puberty arrived, the gap only widened. Anderson seemed to grow up overnight, stepping confidently into young adulthood. Gilbert still felt like a kid trying to keep up. When Anderson began dating actor Lance Kerwin, everything shifted even further. Gilbert admitted she felt like Anderson was operating from a completely different universe. But while that distance shaped their relationship, it didn't keep Gilbert from forming other close friendships. She bonded deeply with Allison Arngrim, who played Nellie Olson. Arngrim later recalled Gilbert openly venting her frustration, even warning her to watch out for Anderson. The comment hinted at deeper emotions simmering under the surface. Several other cast members weighed in over the years. Charlotte Stewart, who played Miss Beadle, saw Anderson as a consummate professional, always prepared, always focused. She believed Anderson's reserved nature was misunderstood as snobbishness, and thought the young actress simply carried herself like an adult from the very beginning. That maturity, though impressive, often made her seem separate from the other kids. When Anderson left the show in 1981, appearing in only 3 episodes of Season 8, rumors exploded again, especially when Arngrim exited soon after. People insisted both departures were tied to Gilbert. Anderson shut that down immediately. She explained that Arngrim's exit was due to a contract issue, while she herself simply felt Mary Ingalls had nowhere left to go. And she made it clear that she and Gilbert were never locked in some jealous rivalry. She'd heard the gossip for years, that they despised each other, that they envied each other, that the set was full of silent battles. According to her, none of that was true. Years later, Anderson reflected on their relationship in her book, The Way I See It. She agreed with much of what Gilbert had said. The two of them simply weren't built for a close friendship. They were too different, shaped by different upbringings, different ambitions, and different pressures. She noted that, although they were only 18 months apart, the emotional distance felt much wider back then. She also saw how Gilbert's parents nurtured her talent early, pushing her into the industry with full support, while Anderson was blazing a trail on her own, determined to build a lifelong career. Because she felt that responsibility so strongly, Anderson often found herself isolated from the other kids on set. She didn't resent Gilbert for her personality or success. They were simply walking separate paths. Despite the quiet tensions and misunderstandings, both actresses admitted the gossip hurt them. Anderson recalled calling Gilbert after reading yet another false story, and the two met up to talk about it. They laughed at the ridiculous rumors, but admitted the chatter took its toll. When Anderson finally stepped away from the show, she expressed real affection for her castmates. They weren't her family, she said, but they were her friends, and she hoped their paths would cross again.